He has wiped out by his grace through faith in Christ your every sin, past, present, future.
Christian hedonist is somebody who says that my greatest joy, my greatest good is God. And therefore, I will pursue that joy and I will pursue that God above all else. So God's glorified and I'm satisfied.
You are now listening to the Pastor Discussions Podcast.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to episode number 107 of the Pastor Discussions Podcast. I'm John.
And I'm Joe, and this is your semi-weekly conversation on doctrine, faith, and the Christian life.
What is it called when you do every other week? Because it's like semi-annual is
semi-weekly.
Twice a year.
Because bi-weekly would be twice a week.
Yeah. So,
I don't know.
I don't know.
Semi-monthly.
Semi-monthly discussion. Oh, man. Yeah, it's been... we just didn't get around to it last week. There's
just lots of... I don't know.
We started in-person worship services last week.
We did, but I don't think that had anything to do with it because
I'm just trying to make excuses.
You don't have an excuse. You've had 10 weeks to prepare, right? I've had 10 weeks to prepare.
Yeah, that's true.
Ish.
It is true.
So,
ish.
At least that's what the talking narrative would be. So
yeah, We're part of the Bar Podcast Network. You can find out more information about them and get great biblical content for your ear holes at thebarpodcast.com. And I wanted to just highlight the Bar Podcast Network has some new additions. There's the Solacast, and then Thoughtful Homemaker is a new one on there that I hadn't seen before. And so go on and check them out. Just Thinking hit one of the top Christian or religious and spirituality podcasts in Apple iTunes podcasts or whatever.
Yeah, I saw
that's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Good job, guys. And so yeah, there's
are those
a lot
the
of great
guys that
content.
are in Omaha?
What's that?
Are those the guys that are in Omaha?
One of them's in Omaha,
Okay,
and one of them's in California, I think. So which we need to get T Barlow on here. And
you've been on that train for a long time.
I know. But we just need to do it. And maybe I can entice him and say, like, we'll record a music video for you if you. It would be really bad. So yeah, and then check out Joel Sedekase and the why did I just lose it?
No,
it's not Just Thinking. That's what messed me up. The
Think Podcast.
Think Podcast. There we go. Just Thinking and the Think Podcast. Yeah. If you want to think. So yeah, check that out. And yeah, so this week, Joe was talking to me just before we decided to do this. And so we're going to have a conversation about social media. Bum, bum, bum. So why don't you kick us off with this, Joe? Because this was your idea, and you've seen some things recently, and so we're just gonna talk about particularly Christian use of social media, and I think it's probably going to be challenging for me because I tend to get easily provoked in some areas on social media. So anyway.
So I just think it's a wise question for us to be asking. I think so many of us just use it because everybody uses it, mm-hmm. right? And it's a medium by which we can spread our message farther and farther. And I'm for that. But I also at the same time have seen what I think is a regression of Christian values in how we use it, mm-hmm. and in the things that we say when we're on it. Are we actually pointing people to the gospel that I think is the intention and behind in most of the posts that I've seen that turn into something else and something that we didn't aim for them to be. So I just think it's a wise question to ask. And I think I've seen two things primarily that have maybe led me to the conclusion that I actually think most Christians need to stop. And so one of them,
So to clarify real quick, are you saying stop with social media, or are you saying stop engaging on certain topics, or are you saying, like, what do you mean by stop?
for the moment, maybe that's okay. Personally, for me,
Okay.
it's stop. It's like, don't comment, don't post, only do it when there's a relationship there.
Okay.
Don't be jumping on these feeds that have 30 comments and you don't like one of them, so you're going to start engaging in this conversation.
Okay. Gotcha.
Like that type of stuff. It's not stop using it, not
Right.
get rid of it, not reject it, but you work in this paradigm of reject, redeem, and
Receive. Yeah.
And I think it's in, like, this is in a redeem category,
Okay.
but we've used it as if it's a receive category.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine.
And so that's been my biggest issue with it. So, and I think there's two main reasons why I would say that. So one, I hear a lot of people say that, well, everybody else is on it and we've got to get a message across to this. All the Christians are on it. This is a way that they'll hear our message and we can dip our toe into that. And what I've seen happen is, especially when you post, pretty often. So if you're once a day or twice a day, or even up to 4 times a week type of a poster, your voice gets drowned out in all the other voices.
Mm-hmm.
So when somebody starts to see you post again and again and again, about whether it's about the same thing or different things, guess what they start to do? They just start to scroll by. They don't necessarily engage with you all the time. You become this voice that's drowned out because they've heard you again and again and again and often and often and often. And so, like, this even happened in the videos that we did for why we were not meeting.
Yeah.
Like, at the beginning, everybody was listening, but the more we offered those things and the more they went out, guess what happened? People stopped watching. People stopped paying attention. Oh, I've heard that. I've heard that. I've heard that. I'm tired of that. Like, that's the nature of social media, as they go right by you. So if your goal then, like, this is just a natural connection for me. If your goal then is to get people to hear your message and you want them to engage with you, you should maybe think about posting less,
Mm-hmm.
because then your voice will stand out instead of getting drowned out in this just sea of voices. So that's one. And then the other one is all I see right now. And really, it's been this way almost for 2 years, probably.
Yeah.
Right. Well, basically since Trump became president, is needless quarreling, and arguing about one thing or the other. And I see this between believers, or, a Christian or a pastor posts something and another believers disagree. And then there's this big needless argument. And the reason it's useless quarreling is because social media breeds pride and arrogance, and people have big opinions. And we already live in this society that is unwilling to dialogue in a useful way, in a way that challenges our positions and actually lets outside ideas in so we can actually see if they're valid or not. We reject that.
Mm-hmm.
And social media is a breeding ground for that type of mentality and that type of conversation. And you see it again and again and again. And part of it is because there's generally very little relationship. And there's also, even though there are consequences to this type of conversation and that type of dialogue, people don't feel it.
Yeah.
Because it's not in their face. It's like there's this safety net.
There's like
between them and the other person. So you don't feel the consequences right away that I think you would. Very few people would engage in conversations like they do on social media, where tensions get really high and people polarize away from each other, just arguing their points instead of engaging with one another. It's so unhealthy for us. And we see it again and again and again. And even when you're trying to be careful, right? When you word things specifically, when you make it, use all caps, and you're like, this is my main point here. People latch on to the thing that offends them.
Yeah.
And then they come back at you at that. And it's impossible to even have the conversation that you want to have because people are looking to fight and looking to divide and looking to get their point across. And so because of that, I just wonder, how healthy is it for us as Christians to be engaged in that regularly, like all the time, popping Facebook up 4 or 5 times a day, scrolling through, engaging in these conversations? Is that the best way for us if our mission is to go and to make disciples of all nations and to spread the gospel? Is that helping or is that hurting our cause and our mission? Like, we at least should be asking that question and thinking through these things. How harmful is the way we are dialoguing right now going to be in us accomplishing our mission? And to be honest, to be unified, if you got evangelical believers who agree on the gospel, we should be unified. There's things that we can disagree on, but there should be a tenor, there should be an attitude, there should, like, that unification that the gospel brings should come out, that should be palatable to other people. And you can't see it.
Yeah.
We are indistinguishable from the world, the way on social media, the way that we polarize and fight about things.
So this brings up sort of like an interesting, as you were talking about that, I was thinking about, so it used to be that in order to dialogue with somebody, you had to write a letter. And that letter took a long time in the not too distant past to get somewhere. And then the letter would be read, and then a response would be written 1, 2, 3 days, 4 days, a week later. And then it would take a while to get to that person. So in order to have a back and forth just with one point and a response, it could take a month. And there's that pace that causes you to think, that causes you to be careful in your wording. You're not responding immediately because it's like, you actually think through what the other person's saying. So then it moved to, like, letters got quicker, and then it moved to email. And now the next progression of that is social media. And what's happened in that process is that there's been a pace quickening to where you're not able to actually thoughtfully process what's been said and respond in a thoughtful way, because it's like, it's instinctual, it's reactionary. It's, and I even find this on my own life. Like, it's like, oh, I've got something to say about that. And I wonder how much of this is even like, we're not designed as human beings to have all this information. We're not designed to know everything that's going on in the world. We're not designed to be experts in every field. We're not designed to be able to have opinions on everything. And because there's so much information, that there's like this information overload, and the result of that is this cantankerous type of back and forth, because what we want to be seen as is right, and we want to have this platform, and we want to be influencers, and influence others in our thought. And what ends up happening is we just get entrenched in our own ideas rather than thoughtfully engaging. So off of that, I was thinking about, it kind of comes down to sort of what we're talking about this Sunday with relationships. God has designed us to communicate by and large in the context of relationships, at least in the context of like face-to-face type of interactions where there's a relational presence there, whether it's because you're friends or because you just met them and they're a real person sitting right across the table from you. You're watching their body expression. You're seeing their facial expressions. Your words, you can see how your words affect them. And what social media does is totally bypasses that human element, and it kind of makes it, you're just talking to a bot on a screen rather than a person. Does that make sense?
I think that, yeah, it completely makes sense. And because, okay, so to go back to the letter analogy, your letter is not going to be like these little snapshot things that are going to build on one another, right? Like that, it takes you some time to think about, okay, what is it that I want to write as I write this down? How do I want to communicate it? The other thing with that though is, I don't know if this is something that has just come up in the last 10 years or whatever it is, but even in Christian circles, there's an unwillingness to even engage in something or a doctrine or a point that you disagree with in any fruitful way, just among Christians. So remove it from social media. You get people going back and forth, and they won't engage with one another's actual beliefs and arguments about something. And so what they do is they build these two things, and they put up straw man about each other, and they burn those things down. And there's just this complete unwillingness for people to actually take in outside information or what somebody else sees or believes or holds to and weigh it against what they're holding to. And it's either out of pride, or it's out of fear that something that maybe I was believing before, maybe I'm wrong on that.
Yeah.
And is that going to break my entire system down in which I hold everything together? And can I rebuild that? Will I have to admit that I'm wrong? Like, all those things are playing into this toxic environment that we're immersed in. And I'm not saying that we are going to be able to get away from it. Like, we're going to have to be a part of it. But the way in which we're going to be a part of it matters if our goal is to not shame people who hold things different than we do, to not belittle people who are doing things that we think maybe aren't right. And it's not to make little of every idea that we disagree with, but how can we engage in that? So say I disagree with you on something. The way social media says you go at that is you just tell them all the stupid points that they have and say, here's all the better ones, instead of engaging with an idea like we would if we're talking. Okay, you said this. Explain to me what you mean by that.
And it's all, you mentioned this earlier, but it's all on a public format. Like,
right. And so
totally public.
So then you get all these voices, right, that are going to start chiming in. Well, I think this, I think this, I think this. And nobody's actually thinking about the actual argument that you're making. You could start with something that is super positive. You're trying to make one point. It's the right point to make. It's the right, maybe it's the right exegetical framework of a text, or it's a point that people need to think about. But because of the environment that we're in, all everybody sees is this other thing. And then the comments blow up with distraction after distraction after distraction about what you were trying to say. And it's completely lost. Okay. Is that not needless quarreling at that point? Because what you were trying to do and point people to one thing turned into something else, because it's in this environment of just, it's in an environment that's a sinful environment, the way that people approach it, no matter how you try to post things. So what do you do with that? That's the question I think we need to answer, is like, do we reject that and just run away from it? I don't think we can, because there are too many believers, and as shepherds, there's our own sheep on there. But what's the best way to engage on that format?
So so basically the question that you're asking is, as a Christian, we should be intentional about how we do things. And so what is the purpose of a Christian being on social media? What's the mission of a Christian? And I think there can be different ones, like you get like Joel Sedekes, he does apologetics. You got other people that are maybe just on to share pictures of their family with friends and keep up with friends. And it's a tool for, maintaining contact with relationships and family. You got some people that maybe get on to prove a point and pick a fight. You got some people that get on to feel like they're stemming the tide of the false ideas that are out there, or the false news reporting that's going on in different areas. And So you got this variety of reasons that people are on this platform. And I think the question that you're asking is, how should we think through as Christians why we're there?
Yes,
that true?
I think that is what I'm saying. Like, what's your purpose? I also think we need to ask the question: is when I post this, is that going to come across?
Yeah.
Am I thinking about the environment that I'm in as I'm posting this, and how people, like, the reality that people are going to attack and try to distract, right, from what the actual point is. So I think those things need to be, I think those two questions need to be thought through and answered in our minds, because I've, to be honest, I've been disappointed with a lot of pastors and church leaders in what they post, because they have an opinion about whether it's about the current environment that we're in with the COVID or the protesting, whichever, like both of those, and how we should be responding to that. Their opinions, they're taking what their philosophies of ministry and what they think they see and putting that out there. Now, I'm not saying that they necessarily shouldn't, but they've also attacked others who hold to opposite views of them without engaging with those people to see why they're holding to that view. Yeah. There's assumptions that are made on everyone's part right now that the other one is doing these things for the wrong reasons, or they have no good reason because I've got a better reason why you should do it this way. Yeah. Like, we're actually fostering this environment as church leaders in some ways of, it's okay to not engage. It's okay to just say these things and assume that everyone else is doing them wrong, or they're doing it for this reason or this reason or this reason. It's like, why don't we actually have a real conversation about the purpose in why we're doing what we're doing and saying what we're saying, instead of assuming those things, and there you get this polarizing effect where it's breaking relationships. It's I think it's causing us to respect each other less. Like, it's just bad. Everything I see about what is going on is, let me spout my opinion because I disagree with a whole bunch of other things that I see, even though I haven't actually talked to anyone to see why they're standing where they stand.
Yeah. So two questions I think that are really important in getting at maybe some answers to those, to that question of how we should engage. The first one is, do you think that platform is conducive to actually having a conversation like that? And number two is, do you think that that platform is conducive to anyone actually changing their mind?
Right. And then you have to ask the question, is this just needless quarreling?
Yeah.
That's actually pushing people away from Scripture. Read 2 Timothy 2. Yeah. Like, I know we're talking about false teaching there, but when you engage in useless conversation, it actually pushes people away from the gospel. So if your aim is to push people towards Christ, to disciple them towards Christ, we are actually accomplishing the exact opposite with the polarizing, arguing, bickering that happens.
So how do you balance that then with, like, so you see dangers, in worldview, you see dangers in direction and policy for our country or for the church or anything like that. Like, how do you balance that with that environment of social media? I mean, the alternative, I can hear somebody maybe thinking, well, the alternative is to just be silent since nobody's mind is really being changed, and you can't have that kind of dialogue. And if we're silent, then the other side wins and everything goes that direction. Like, how do you balance that out? You know what I mean?
Like, so not just becoming somebody who is a hermit and like rejects it. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Like, but at the same time, engaging in a fruitful way. So not like totally like backing off of social media and being silent, but engaging, maybe being discerning in what you engage in, but also doing it in a productive way? Like, is there a way to do that?
So how many people are talking about the exact same thing you're talking about and advocating for the exact same thing that you're advocating for, that have a bigger platform and broader audience and bigger voice? Okay, so I think that's one thing we could look at. I also think, I'm not saying we don't engage, but what is God calling you to be passionate about and talking about? He's not calling you to be passionate and talking about everything and having an opinion that is an uninformed opinion about everything.
Yeah.
But people on social media have an opinion about everything and are an expert about everything. So what is it that you're passionate about? What has God given you a passion for? And when you see something against that, speak into that. But what's your goal?
Yeah.
Like, to be honest, I look at these posts and I'm like, I don't see any goal here other than to spout your own opinion, to get people to say, oh yeah, that's a good opinion. Oh yeah, that's right. I'm going to swing over there and hold to that. Like, if your actual goal is to, like, for me as a shepherd, when I post something, I want people to be challenged to think to about whatever it is that, and I rarely post. I get that. Like, I comment maybe once a month on something, post very few things. But part of that is because other people are speaking to the issues that I want to speak on. They're saying things in a better way. And I also don't want to put something out there where someone can just start attacking and start this poisonous feed that as people engage and try to, with the idea that I'm trying to help them engage on, see this crap that comes out after it from somebody who's polar opposite, who disagrees with me.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not saying, because I'm not going to disengage from it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But is it worth posting something once a day? Is it worth posting something 3 times a week? That maybe one isn't as fruitful to others as you think it is, because other people are speaking on it, and other people are probably speaking better on it that maybe don't have that relationship with you. So they can maybe disconnect from that, but still take in that information. So think about the audience you're trying to communicate with. Maybe have less friends. Like, how many people have, 1,000 friends? Do you really know 1,000 people?
Yeah, exactly.
On Facebook? Because if your target audience is the people that you actually know and you want to speak with, then post it there where it's just them that'll see it.
Yeah.
Maybe you need to clear out your account a little bit, or you've separated and you've got a public and private. Are they actually public and private?
Yeah.
Maybe you choose to post things on public differently than you would the things you would choose to post privately.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what are you trying to accomplish there? I think we haven't thought through the impact that this has on us, and the impact that it has on other people, the things that we're posting and the conversations and arguments that we actually get into in that format. Are you willing to more, if you see a comment, private message that person that maybe it isn't helpful, hey, I'd love to have that conversation. I think you misunderstood what I said. Mm-hmm. Instead of letting this argument play out in front of everybody that comes across as just distasteful.
Yeah.
So I really think this just comes down to, if your goal is just to get a bigger platform, which that's kind of what it seems like, then it's not going to change. But if your goal is to shepherd people, then we need to actually think about, or to actually engage in ideas and help people think through things better, even if you're not a pastor. Why would you try to harm that? Why would you try to block that with being controversial, with having an attitude that assumes you understand where other people are at and what they're saying? So those are, and I'm talking to myself here too, because I when I look at those posts, even though I don't engage in them, like, there's some assumptions that I tend to make. Mm-hmm. And that happens because of the environment that's been fostered on social media.
Yeah, we've been talking a lot about relationships, experiences, and information. And the social media is basically just straight information that hijacks and distorts relationship.
Well, and how many people, like you think about Twitter, how many people tweet something and then remove it almost immediately? It's like, oh man, I didn't think through that very well.
Yeah.
But it's you've already done the damage.
And then somebody screenshotted it immediately.
Yep.
And it shows up
and
later.
then you get this mass response of polarizing views, attacking, defending.
And in the same vein, like, do we really think that we're having that much of an impact because of the information overload? Like, how much do you remember of what you read from Facebook yesterday?
I would actually make the argument that the culture that we're living in is affecting us as Christians more than us engaging in this environment is affecting them.
Yeah.
Because that mentality of polarization and arguing and not listening to one another is in the church rampantly. And not just in the local church, but in like the seminaries, it's in the institutions.
Yeah.
You've got two sides to everything. You've got three views to everything, and people will plant their flag and make their arguments and won't even engage in the other. Their objective is to prove that everybody else is wrong and they are right.
Mm-hmm.
That comes through again and again and again. That we need to realize that when we engage in some of these practices on social media, we're actually training ourselves to act just like the outside world acts, instead of it being the other way around. Maybe that's what it comes down to, is we're supposed to be influencers of the culture, and through social media, I actually think we've been influenced by the world more than the other way around. Yeah. And that's the biggest danger that I see, and my biggest disappointment and probably sadness as I've seen believers engage in things on social media and get caught up in these arguments and not listen to what other people are saying.
Yeah. I think there's also another side impact, and it can cause you to become callous and cold toward other people because you are detached from them. I mean, you can say whatever you want and it won't impact anything. I mean, you can essentially train yourself to be a jerk, and
right, because there's no immediate consequence.
Yeah. So then that influences and has impact on real relationships, because at some point something changes and you're like, oh well, if I can be a jerk online, it's just who I am.
Or you don't even know it,
yeah,
and it's affected somebody that you do know, and they're hurt by that,
yeah,
because they either misread it or they assume things about it, or you really were being a jerk and they got offended. I mean, like those are realities that I just don't think that, by and large, I'm not going to make a blanket statement, but by and large, I don't think believers are thinking about.
Yeah.
Like, we've detached the reality of our words that we post on social media from what's happening in what we quote unquote real world.
Yeah.
It's like there's this separate universe that we've put it in, and it's just not that way. Like, these things have real effects and real consequences on people.
It's kind of just like it's kind of like a digital mob where everybody's yelling and nobody can make out any message whatsoever because everybody's yelling something different and yelling at the person that's yelling this, and it's kind of impossible to sift through it and sort through it. So do you think that one last question on this? Do you think that, because I've seen even on like local newspaper and things like this, like they'll post an article where before it was like you read the article and you got together with your friends and talked about it, when now everybody just says what they think on that public platform, and their friends might see it, might not, but everybody gets to see it. Do you think that part of the wisdom in this is taking things that are said on social media and using those as a vehicle for engagement with people face to face. Like, not necessarily the person that posted it, but somebody posts an article, rather than commenting on that article on a public forum and hoping your friends see it or whatever, like actually sending the article to them and being like, hey, let's talk about this. What were some things that, here's what I saw in it, you know what I mean?
Isn't that what we're supposed to do? Like, okay, instead of putting it out on public, well, because if you see an article that you engage with, that you agree with, and you're going to post it, two things I think are happening. One, you want to promote that, but two, you also want to promote it to the people who disagree with it.
Right.
And so you're doing that on a public forum versus, hey, this was challenging to me, or this was affirming to me, sending it to the person who you think, or you've had those conversations with personally, and inviting them into a dialogue versus, like, it's like a passive aggressive poking people when we do that on Facebook publicly. That's what it comes across to.
Which is ignorant at the same time, because like, I'm assuming that I'm so important and I have so much good stuff to say that the person that disagrees with the title of my article, that has a lot of good points but has a clickbaity title, is going to actually open it and read it.
Right.
Versus just scrolling through
and finding the things that they disagree with.
Yeah.
Or finding the main points.
Yeah.
And
or even just reading articles that they agree with the premise of, like the confirmation bias thing. So yeah, that's good. Go ahead.
I also think, as for pastors, I think we need to be extra cautious in this, because we do influence people. And one of the calls of the pastor, one of the qualifications is he is to be known in the community and not have he's supposed to have a good reputation in the community. Are you ruining
Not
your
quarrelsome.
Yeah, are you ruining your reputation? Not so much with the people who you serve, because most, in a healthy body, they're going to know you, right? And be able to have a conversation, or with me, or with, if you're listening to this. Are you known in your community as that guy who's poking, who's quarrelsome, who's arguing? Or are you known as a gentleman, or someone who's gentle, someone who's willing to have a conversation, who's inviting others in? And there's a difference. That's not a pushover. You're not a pansy. You're not somebody who doesn't engage. But the way in which you engage makes you respectful or respected by the community that you live in.
Which I think
like, we need to think about how our social media presence actually changes how people think about us in the communities that we live in.
And that's a double-edged sword too, because you can get to where you're trying to placate the prevailing views of the community, and trying to get a good reputation, air quotes, by allowing yourself to be influenced by what they think.
Right.
And so there's a balance there with that. And that kind of leads into that last question of, what do you think is a wise way for pastors to utilize social media and set an example in this? Like, would you suggest any beyond the big principles that we've talked about, would you suggest any specific helpful practices for pastors to implement to model this for their congregations, and to avoid either placating to the predominant views of the culture in certain areas, or being seen as just having an axe to grind with everybody?
I don't have any necessarily, like, here's what you should do. I want a
prescription, Joe.
I would follow some principles. One, or just remember some things. You are one voice in an ocean of voices. Okay, your influence doesn't go as far as you think it does. And not as many people read your post as you think they do.
Yeah.
So when you post, do you, like, I would limit, like, I honestly think it would be good to limit your post. I think it would be good to limit your interaction, because when you post something, if you want people to see it, I haven't heard something from this person in a while, or this person only posts things that I think are helpful. Like, are you quarreling when you're posting? Are you arguing? Are you trying to help people see things? What are your goals? But I honestly would limit posts. I think I just think that's a wise practice for us, because if our objective is to help people and to shepherd them and to help them see the gospel, then you need to be heard. And if you're posting all the time, in general, I've talked to a lot of people about this. They're like, I'm going to go past that, because that guy, he posts a lot, and a lot of it's polarizing, right? It's driving wedges. It's controversial. It's opinionated.
Josh does a really good job of that.
Yeah,
Like, Josh is on social media, and he'll be like, so and so posted this, and so he's on.
Yeah,
but he it's like kind of like a digital, quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to anger type of posture.
So maybe we need to just take that command, and it needs to be applied to social media. We need to be quick to listen. We need to be slow to speak. So that means I have to think.
Yeah.
Right. And I need to not be
discerning about what I say.
Right. And I need to not be frustrated, even if somebody disagrees, or that thing maybe is my hot button topic, or it's my hobby horse. It's the thing that grinds my gears. Like, I think Christians do a better job of doing that face to face than they do on social media. It's like those things go out the window.
It's like two different worlds.
Those principles don't go away.
Yeah.
That biblical command applies to how we use social media. So I would post less. This is Joe's opinion, because I think it would help people to hear you more. I'd also be very particular about what I choose to post about.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that doesn't mean that we can't post about social issues. That doesn't mean that we can't post about political issues
or opinions.
And it doesn't mean that we can't post about spiritual issues, things within our own denominations or in the Christian world. I'm not saying any of those things are off limits, but realize the way you say things and what you say matters. So if you're going to get on there and rant a little bit, realize that comes across.
Mm-hmm.
Realize even when you're not ranting, when you're trying to make a point out of love and a genuine care, people are going to see rant and can read that into it, because that's the environment that social media has created.
Yeah.
So don't forget that when you post. Don't forget that when you write. Don't forget that when you copy a link and put it in there.
This is why I think books are just better. I mean, you can't write the author back right then and there, and
you're not mad at him when he disagrees with you.
You're just like, oh, okay, well, it's like this. Yeah, print media, I think, beats. So maybe another application in this would be especially for pastors.
Maybe do a YouTube video and shut the comments off.
Yeah. or just read more. Like, I mean, rather than reading on social media, being intentional about reading and grabbing a book, and then maybe using a blog with the comments turned off as a means of getting thoughts and opinions out, because they'll be more refined, they'll be more thought out, and they'll be informed by what you're reading. So they'll actually be building on things that others have written and taken time to think about, and will be maybe more beneficial to the advancement of civility and thought.
Think and don't react. Don't assume you know what the other person's talking about. And then is your intention, or maybe not, maybe this is a better way to say it. When you engage with people who disagree with you, do you let any of that information in to challenge your preconceptions, your beliefs, your thoughts, to see if there's validity? Or are you just posting things that are getting your point across and driving wedges and not actually engaging with other people.
Yeah.
Like if the point is to engage and to help people see things that you see and to learn yourself, then if that's your goal, okay, you need to think about what you're doing and how either that's helping you to accomplish your goal or it's actually pulling you away from accomplishing your goal.
Yeah.
So maybe it is as simple as just don't respond quickly. Think about what's said. Don't get frustrated, and engage in a way that challenges you as well as other people.
Yeah. Yeah. I still think the reading more thing is a valid.
I
think the more I think about it, the more like there's a process of reading a long book or an argument in a book where you're actually having to work through the whole argument. You're not just like picking up on little things, and then there's time to process and time to evaluate in that.
I also think reading a lot teaches you how to write responses in a way that's not attacking, in a way that doesn't come across as I've got it figured out. Because there are some writers that write that way, but by and large, especially if you're reading, a Christian book, there's going to be multiple perspectives and respect for those perspectives, even though that particular author has his own and his own set of beliefs. He doesn't bash or be disrespectful or assume things most of the time.
Right.
Most of the time.
Yeah, if it's a good book.
So you'll learn how to write, I think, appropriate responses that are written in a way that doesn't continue to foster the environment that social media lives in. So.
Yeah, that's good. Well, if you disagree with us, don't start an argument on this post. So, that's the moral of this story.
That's not what I said.
No, but I think it is good. It's something good for us to all think about and evaluate, because it's like a Trojan horse. You don't realize how sucked in you get into it until you're
and I don't think you can disengage on it.
Yeah,
like you have to be engaged on it. It's just like,
but you can own it. You can own your social media presence. You can determine your own rules of engagement. You don't have to follow what everybody else is doing and be like everybody else. You can take control of your social media presence in a way that reflects your values and what you want to accomplish, and not feel pressured by other people to get sucked into what everybody else is doing.
You got to realize the people that you have influence on versus the people that you don't.
Yeah.
As you're thinking through this, because so many people, I think, are trying to comment on other people's stuff that they have no influence over. Yeah. And that's actually having an influence on the people that you do have one, and a lot of times it's negative. So yeah, there's so many bad things about it that it can take us down. I still don't think social media itself is bad. It's just that sinners are using it. It's immoral. And we tend to get drawn into that and act like that as well. So it's just a caution. Yeah. So that's good, man. Okay. Well, I don't know when we'll be back. Hopefully next week. We'll try to get a little better. It's a normal week, and we're starting to get back in the swing of things. So hopefully you'll be back on the next episode. Hopefully it'll be next week. Next episode of the Pastor Discussions Podcast, your weekly conversation on doctrine, faith, and the Christian life.